He didn't think it mattered. Not really. Not in the grand scheme of things. It was just a small gesture. A moment, a blink in a long, forgettable morning. He had been standing in line at the corner cafe, 2 blocks from his office. The one with the fogged-up windows and chipped green paint that always smelled like burnt cinnamon. He came here every Thursday out of routine more than preference. Same drink, same seat. Same unread book cracked open on the table. More for show than for interest. He didn't notice her at first, not until he saw the barista's eyes glance over his shoulder, tighten, then look down again. Then he heard the voice, quiet, croaky, like someone speaking through gravel. Just the coffee, please. No croissant today. She was thin, not fashionable, thin, exhausted, thin. Her apron was faded and damp in one corner, like she'd spilled something earlier and hadn't had time to change. Her nails were bitten down. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail so tight it looked painful. Her shoulders curled inward like she didn't want to take up space. And yet, her voice was polite, controlled. She kept her eyes down as she slid a wrinkled 5 across the counter and gave a weak smile. She looked like someone trying not to fall apart where people could see. The cashier tapped a few buttons. That's still short. Sorry. She hesitated, reached into her apron, pulled out some change, counted quarters, a nickel, a penny. Still short. I'll just take water then. It's okay. He didn't know why he did it. He just stepped forward. Put it on mine. The girl blinked, looked up. She had the kind of eyes that don't belong on someone that young. Like she'd lived twice the life she should have. There was a bruise just beneath one sleeve, and her name tag was bent. She opened her mouth to object, but he shook his head gently. No big deal. She stared at him for a moment, searching for a catch. When none came, she whispered, "Thank you," so quietly it almost got lost in the hiss of the espresso machine. He didn't wait around for her to drink it. He paid, grabbed his usual, and left. It was raining outside. Not hard, just enough to mist your glasses and make the city smell like rust. He never even got her name, and she never forgot his face. The weeks passed. Then months. He didn't return to that cafe again, not because of her. He just stopped noticing the world in general. When his father died unexpectedly that winter, something in him collapsed quietly. He still wore the same ties, said the right things in meetings, made all his deadlines, but his eyes stayed hollow, his days turned gray. Food didn't taste like anything. Conversations became background noise. Grief made the world feel far away. He forgot about the girl, about the coffee, about the quiet way she had whispered thank you like no one had ever done that for her before. Until the heart attack. It came without warning. No chest pain, no numb arm, just a strange tightness in his jaw, and then darkness. He collapsed on the floor of his office, hands still frozen over his keyboard. When he woke, everything was white. Ceiling, lights, sheets. It smelled like antiseptic and old paper. There was a machine beeping slowly beside him and a plastic clip pinching his finger. His chest ached like it had been split open and stitched back together. A nurse was adjusting something beside him. He tried to speak, but his throat was dry and his mouth full of sand. She turned toward him, and froze. It was her older, her hair now pulled into a bun, her scrubs clean, her posture straighter, but the eyes were the same. For a moment, she just stared, her hands still midair, her breath catching. You, she whispered. It's you. He blinked. She glanced at the chart, read the name, looked back at him, eyes wide with disbelief. You're the man from the coffee shop. He tried to speak, but couldn't. So he just nodded once. She smiled, and it was the first time he'd ever seen her really smile. I'm your nurse, she said gently. I watched over you during surgery. You coded once on the table. We had almost lost you. Her voice was steady, professional, but her hands were trembling slightly as she adjusted the IV line. If you hadn't made it, she said, quieter now, I would have carried that forever. He didn't understand, until she added, I'm studying to be a trauma surgeon, doing my clinicals that day at the cafe. I had just gotten accepted. I didn't have money for lunch, and I was going to walk out. I was so tired that day, I was ready to give up. She looked down, then back at him. You bought me a coffee. You didn't even ask my name. Tears welled at the corner of her eyes. I promised myself if I ever got through med school, I'd thank you properly, but I never thought I'd see you again. Not like this. He stared at her. His throat still wouldn't work, but there was something wet sliding down his cheek now. He hadn't cried since the funeral. She smiled again, gentler this time, and placed a warm hand on his wrist. You saved me first, she saved. For the next few days, she was always there. Not constantly, not hovering, but always when it mattered. She checked his vitals before the shifts changed, tucked the blanket higher when no one else was watching, adjusted the blinds in the morning so the sun wouldn't hit his face directly, left notes with silly doodles when she had to cover another floor. On his worst night, when the chest pain came back and the panic surged hot and wild, it was her voice that pulled him back to breathing. You're okay. I'm here. Just breathe with me. That's it. One more. She didn't talk much about herself. But over time, in passing moments, little things emerged. Her name was Maya. She'd worked double shifts all through college, waitressing by night, studying anatomy in the pantry during breaks. Her mother had been a nurse, her father absent. She got her white coat by scraping through every scholarship and loan and rejection letter imaginable. She said it like a joke, but he could hear the ache underneath. She didn't believe in luck, she said, only in people who showed up when it mattered. And that day years ago he had showed up, with 5 words, "Put it on my tab." That was all it took. He couldn't explain why it hit him so hard. But one night, as the monitor beeped slow and steady beside him, he asked something he hadn't asked anyone in years. "Why do you care?" She looked up from the chart. He added, "You could have let someone else take me." Maya tilted her head, thoughtful, then said softly, "Because you saw me." That stopped him. She continued, "Most people don't. Back then, I was invisible, just another tired girl behind a counter. But you looked up, you stepped forward. You gave something without asking anything back. That stayed with me." Then, she added, "And now you're here. When it was my turn to see you." He didn't speak. Couldn't, because for the first time in a very long time, he didn't feel hollow, he felt seen. He was discharged 2 weeks later. His heart was healing. The doctors said he'd be fine if he followed orders, changed his diet, took his pills, slept more, stressed less. But something had already shifted. Long before his body started recovering, he found himself listening more, watching more, noticing things he'd once moved past without thought. The man at the crosswalk who always stood on one leg, the kid outside the pharmacy selling lemonade, with a cardboard sign that had the E backward, the street musician playing violin near the subway who never asked for tips, but always smiled like the whole city was his dot. Maya had shown him something he didn't know he'd forgotten. The quiet power of being seen. And he couldn't go back to sleepwalking through life. He sent her flowers first, not expensive ones, just daisies, with a card that read, "For the one who reminded me what a heartbeat feels like," then a letter, then a visit. They became something that didn't have a name right away. She was still in rotations. He was still rebuilding. But they'd meet sometimes after her shift, sharing street tacos in the hospital parking lot. She told him about sutures and surgery prep. He told her about the books he was finally reading cover to cover. One night, after a long silence, he said, "You know, I don't remember your face from that day." She smiled. "You weren't supposed to." He asked, "Why didn't you tell me right away?" In the hospital, she looked down, then met his eyes. "Because I didn't want it to be about death. I wanted it to be real." Then she reached across the table, took his hand, and said, "And now it is." Years passed. Life, as it does, shifted again. He stayed healthy. Not perfect, but present. He took walks more, called his sister back, apologized to a friend he hadn't spoken to since the funeral. He learned how to cook lentil soup from scratch, started journaling, sometimes even danced in his kitchen alone when no one was watching. And Maya, as she made it, scrubs turned into a white coat, her name stitched in small blue thread, Dr. Maya L. Bennett, M.D. She looked different on her first day as a surgeon, stronger, steadier, but the eyes were still the same, still searching, still soft, still holding the memory of every person she had once waited on, every patient who came in terrified, and every name she never got to learn. He was there for her white coat ceremony. Front row, tearing up quietly while pretending not to. She found him afterward, still in the same scarf he wore that day at the cafe, and hugged him like she never wanted to let go. "I wouldn't be here," she whispered, "if you hadn't bought me that coffee." He laughed. "I think you would have found a way." She shook her head. "No, you changed the direction, just by noticing me." And then, one night, it happened again. But this time, the roles were reversed. He was in the hospital lobby, dropping off dinner for her after a 16-hour shift. She hadn't eaten all day. He brought her favorite, soup dumplings and ginger tea. He was waiting near the elevators when the doors opened, and panic broke out. A young man barely out of high school was stumbling, blood pouring from his side. 2 friends shouted for help. A nurse screamed for a gurney. Maya's voice echoed down the hall. "Trauma bay." Now, she appeared seconds later, already gloving up, barking orders, and right before she disappeared behind the emergency doors, she turned and locked eyes with him. And in that moment, he understood. It was never just about saving him. That coffee, that moment, it started a ripple. One quiet kindness that echoed forward into something enormous. Because now, she was the one saving lives. Dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands. That boy, bleeding on the gurney, he'd never know. Never hear the story, but he'd survive because years ago, a stranger at a coffee shop had looked up from his phone and chose to care. And now, Maya was the kind of woman who made people live, because one man once made her feel seen. That was everything.